Before I start my presentation, I want to convey to you guys that everything which is being discussed over here, part of it is put up into a handout which is available on www.jyotirmay.com. Just visit the web page called Nystagmus and go right on the bottom of the web page, and there is a link to the handout to this instruction course on principles and paradigms of nystagmus. Coming to the examination and non-surgical management of nystagmus, again, we know a lot of things have been covered. I am going to skip those things which are covered. Various nystagmus entities are seen in clinical practice, and each nystagmus case is different. If you really probe hard, in fact, around 90% of patients with nystagmus might have a sensory defect or a localizable neurological defect. So it just depends on how hard you probe. You will have a incidence of secondary or associated defects. Of course, the presentation is based on these two articles. I would strongly recommend you guys should read these articles and base your foundations on this article. By definition, nystagmus is a rhythmic, involuntary, repetitive to and fro movement of the eye. It's a motor definition. And one of the most important tests that I would like to do at the beginning of the examination of a child with nystagmus is to perform the cover test. In fact, vision assessment will also start with the cover test when we start assessing the monocular vision assessment. And as Dr. Hurtle has pointed out, this is pure latent nystagmus, and even in pure latent nystagmus, if you do video nystagmography, you might find a significant number of them are actually having a very low frequency and low amplitude nystagmus. Similarly, in this particular child, there is an esotropia in the left eye, and on covering the right eye, you find the latent nystagmus becoming manifest. Actually, the latent nystagmus is no more called as a latent nystagmus. We should all call this as fusion maldevelopment nystagmus syndrome, which is always associated with some sort of strabismus because of loss of binocularity in early life. And vision testing in such children should be not done by just blocking the eye and complete occlusion of the field, but it should be either a central blockage of the visual field or do a fogging so that the peripheral fusion is still intact while the vision is being checked. And in our study, we have found the best of the nystagmus where you have the highest visual prognosis is fusion maldevelopment nystagmus syndrome. And if you treat the squint, everything is actually treated. The nystagmus really dampens very well, and simultaneously vision also improves, fusion also improves, stereopsis also improve, visual function improve. This is the child where, as you see over here, child fixates in adduction with the left eye, face turned to the left side, and when there is a spontaneous fixation switch to the right side, this is not a typical periodic alternating nystagmus where there is a typical periodicity or uniform periodicity, but aperiodically the child switches the fixation from one eye to the other eye. Unless you do a cover test on them, you may not be able to identify that this patient are actually fusion maldevelopment nystagmus syndromes and changing the fixation. So to find in patients who are switching their face head turn or those who are having changes in the direction of the nystagmus, you must do a cover test to find out whether this is because of fusion maldevelopment nystagmus syndrome or this is a typical periodic alternating nystagmus, because the treatment is going to be different for both of them. Sometimes it is very obvious that this child is switching the fixation from one eye to the other eye, and the direction of the nystagmus also keeps switching from the left to the right as the fixation switches. But unless you do an eye movement recording in some patients like this, it is very difficult, and you may still make a diagnosis of aperiodic or a periodic alternating nystagmus. This is the kind of eye movement recording that you will obtain in patients who have fusion maldevelopment nystagmus syndrome. This is called as a typical decelerating slow phases with a saccadic correction, as you see over here. This is the patient who has had an exotropia. Unless a patient with strabismus is proved otherwise to have infantile nystagmus syndrome, around 80% patients who have strabismus, you can consider them having actually fusion maldevelopment nystagmus syndromes. And when you do an eye movement recording, that is what you will get. This is the patient who had, before the surgery, as you see, there is a significant reduction in the nystagmus by correction of the strabismus. This is the classification which was just put forward. So after the cover test is done, the next thing we look at is the kind of nystagmus the patient has, whether it is a pendular type or whether it is a jerk type, because pendular is more frequently associated with the sensory defects, while infantile nystagmus syndrome can have jerk type also, or as well as pendular types also. In general, oculocutaneous albinism is associated more frequently with pendular nystagmus and periodic alternating nystagmus, while strabismus is more frequently associated with the jerk type of nystagmus. As you see over here, this is a jerk type of a nystagmus. So apart from just looking at whether it is pendular or jerk, we also would like to look at whether there is a associated significant vertical component to the horizontal nystagmus. In presence of significant vertical component, what we have found is there is more likelihood of identifying a sensory defect as compared to a pure horizontal nystagmus. This is the patient who presented with the upbeat nystagmus, pure upbeat nystagmus, usually uniplanar nystagmus, usually would need a neuroimaging, such as this particular patient. When you do an MRI, we found an Arnold-Chiari malformation, and this patient was by Dr. Hertel prescribed Empira, but it is not available in the country. Hence, we started the patient on tablet Memantine 10 mg twice a day without any side effect. There was a significant reduction in the nystagmus amplitude, frequency, and the patient was rid of oscillopsia. That is how he had presented to us. Some patients will present with intermittent nystagmus, which is uniplanar again, which is in vertical direction, as you see over here, and all of these patients actually will require neuroimaging. Patients who have sensory defects associated with infantile nystagmus syndrome, as you see over here, all these three patients are having significant vertical component to their horizontal nystagmus. We would suggest to look for sensory defects in their eye or do an ERG for these patients, even if pupillary abnormalities are absent. Also look for conjugacy or disjugacy in the nystagmus. Presence of disjugacy is a significant sign of looking into the eye further or looking into the neural system further. For example, this particular child had subtle changes of retinopathy of prematurity. In the periphery, there was cicatrix of retinopathy of prematurity, or patients may be having unilateral colobomas, toxoplasma scars. They also present with unilateral nystagmus. And of course, patients who have significant dissociation such as seesaw nystagmus will straight away go for neuroimaging. And patients who have pendular nystagmus associated with optic atrophy or diabetes or associated appetite abnormalities or muscle wasting should also go for neuroimaging. Next thing that we look in every patient who has nystagmus is whether there is convergence dampening or no. Of course, there are significant number of patients who demonstrate convergence dampening, as you see over here, but what is important is the vision should be better on logMAR for near as versus distance, and it should be reproducible with the base out prism for distance fixation. If that does happen, these patients are candidates for base out prismosphere correction or bilateral medial rectus recessions. This was the patient operated by Dr. Hertel when he came last time to Rajamundry. His nystagmus significantly dampened with 16 prism base out, as you see over here, while he is fixating at distance, and he was operated for bilateral medial rectus recession. We saw the patient next day and there was 3-line improvement in the visual acuity in this patient immediately after the surgery. We don't know what happens to them in terms of their fusion over the years. Maybe we'll see it this week when we go over there. Another thing that you should look for is abnormality in the head posture. Of course, the way you measure is either a goniometer or just a simple protractor, and there are many other things which have been described. But at this point in time, what we are using is an on protractor or a smart protractor, which is available as an application, which is a see-through application. Take a photograph, superimpose the protractor, and then this is good for documentation as well as for finer measurement. Head oscillation is another abnormality for which we probably do not have a very good answer. However, people have reported that correction of nystagmus improves the head oscillation. Just the age, like it improves the nystagmus, also improves the head oscillation. And also, Dr. Hertel was doing a study on Botox injection in the occipital triangle on the back side of the neck to alter the proprioception over there for head oscillation. Of course, a child having head nodding which is vigorous, having large excursion, which if you do an eye movement with head rotation recording is having 180-degree opposite excursion, should be thought of as having spasmus nutans. You would like to neuroimage them if the nystagmus is intermittent or there is high frequency, small amplitude pendular nystagmus with significant amount of disjugacy. However, presence or absence of torticollis is not very significant factor in deciding whether you should neuroimage patients with this. And last but not least, in the examination, you should check optokinetic nystagmus. Again, this is an application, free application available in Eye Handbook. It's an Android as well as an iOS application, and you need to check the nystagmus on OKN on up gaze as well as down gaze. If you find it is absent, then your threshold for suspecting a neurological nystagmus is going to be higher. The recording of nystagmus is graphical as we have for strabismus. This is the kind of recording that we would do. One single arrow, if you have more than one arrows, it will increase. That means there is increase in the frequency of nystagmus. The length of the arrow will tell you the amplitude, and of course directions are also written on the or marked on the chart. So in summary, apart from the visual functions that Nipa had demonstrated, the fogging should be done and the near vision has to be checked in every patient where you suspect convergence dampening. Refraction, I would say accommodation should be assessed in patients with nystagmus because significant number of patients have accommodative abnormalities such as patients with aniridia or patients who have cerebral visual impairment associated nystagmus. They have accommodative abnormalities. Pupillary reaction also need to be looked at very carefully. Paradoxical we have had patients where paradoxical pupillary response was the key to our diagnosis of patient having retinal dystrophy. Cover test needs to be performed to figure out whether it is a true PAN or a fusion maldevelopment nystagmus syndrome, and of course in the diagnosis of strabismus, look at convergence dampening, true or pseudo convergence dampening. Look at the presence of vertical component which will increase your suspicion for associated defects. Look for dysgeucasy or dissociation in the nystagmus which will make you evaluate the patient more in the neurological terms. Look at the head postures and null point because this is going to decide the prognosis. The visual prognosis is much better in patients who develop abnormal head posture and have a null point, it's a compensatory mechanism. And I would suggest you use an ON protractor, which is an application on the Android. And head oscillations you need to rule out spasmus mutatus like syndrome where you have associated neurological abnormality. Coming to a few of the tips in the management, I think a lot of things have been already covered. Apart from doing this investigation such as eye movement recording, electrophysiology and neuroimaging, refractive management would include prescription of spectacles, which could be spectacles with photogray or tinted lenses or even low vision devices. You would also like to prescribe contact lenses. In fact, we have a study wherein we are just putting on the plano contact lenses and after half an hour to 1 hour, we repeat an eye movement recording to see whether just putting a contact lens is actually dampening the nystagmus or no. Low vision aids are also required and filters are also required. Pharmacological management, drug 1 and drug 2, there are multiple drugs available, but then the newer drops have actually made us use drops as a priority treatment rather than using the drugs primarily, except where it is a drug of choice, such as baclofen for periodic alternating nystagmus, and Botox is being evaluated for head oscillation. Surgical management will be covered by Dr. Rohit Saxena. As far as the refractive management is concerned, I just want to stress that you need to look at the accommodation in these patients, and patients who have aniridia or albinism or cerebral visual impairment perform dynamic retinoscopy or dynamic distance direct ophthalmoscopy. Nystagmus with altered head posture prisms may be helpful, but usually they are not very much amenable because the head postures, when they're significant, you need to prescribe more than 20 to 30 prism at least. However, it is useful for patients who have true convergence dampening. Contact lenses, as you see over here, this patient without the contact lens on the upper panel, and the same patient immediately after putting on the contact lens, there was 1 octave improvement in the logMAR chart. Botox has been proposed for management of patients with intractable oscillopsia who are terminal age, debilitated patients. You may inject 25 international unit in the retrobulbar space and may have reduction in the oscillopsia. I have absolutely no experience with this, but there have been multiple articles on this. Head posture, again, we don't have much good treatment available for this, but there is one article from Dr. Michael Brodsky wherein patient who had head posture and underwent the strabismus surgery with the correction of nystagmus had an improvement in the head oscillation. And when he developed strabismus again with the decompensation of the fusional amplitude, there was again resurgence of the head oscillation. Brinzolamide we use for at least 1 week and call the patient again. If you don't have the eye movement recording system, I think it is a good idea to use the visual function scoring system. Or again, there are Android applications wherein you can check the stimulus time. or use the contrast as he has just mentioned. Baclofen is a drug of choice for very well known abnormality, that is periodic alternating nystagmus. This is the detail how we use it. We start with 5 milligram 3 times in a day and then keep increasing depending on the age and weight of the child. It is also very useful for patients who have upbeat nystagmus, especially because acquired upbeat nystagmus, they are usually transient and you need to use it for shorter time. 4-aminopyridines are not available in India. If you want to import, it's available from Israel and US. Israel is much cheaper, but that cheaper is also quite expensive for patients. Coming to Memantine, it is available by again Admenta or this is available from Sun Pharma. I think Memantine Admenta is available from there, and we have had good experience in n equal to 1 this particular patient where with Memantine there was significant reduction in the vertical nystagmus. We have only one patient where we have used gabapentin, as you see over here. This particular patient before this is the patient who has had congenital hereditary endothelial dystrophy and underwent the right eye corneal surgery, total keratoplasty. Unfortunately, we did not have recording of the eye movements before the surgery was done, but after surgery, before we started gamma and after we gave the GABA, we had the recording. There was a significant improvement in the visual functions. Around 3 lines improvement took place. Actually, 3 line was 1 by 60 became 3 by 60, and when he stopped GABA, again it dropped down. However, brinzolamide was considered contraindicated because this was a keratoplasty patient, so we are not allowed to use brinzolamide for this particular patient. So he's continuing on GABA without any side effect at this point in time. I just want to show you this one. When I told about this to Dr. Hertel, he said in my young days I also tried this. In between what we started doing was we would put the speculum, put the Peracane eye drops and hold the eyeball with the forceps and make sure there is no, at least as much as nystagmus can be stopped without really deforming the cornea and inducing a new refractive error. We asked the patient whether stopping the nystagmus or dampening the nystagmus with the forceps would actually improve their vision or no, and we tried to compare it with our brinzolamide as well as surgical outcome, but unfortunately it doesn't really correlate very well. It is a neurological phenomenon. It can't be treated mechanically. And Dr. Pradeep Sharma has an article on auditory and somatosensory stimuli. In fact, even meditation is found to have significant effect on reduction in nystagmus. All of us know that patients who have nystagmus, when they become really anxious, they do have increase in the nystagmus. And genetics in nystagmology, again, there is not much available, but again, I had seen one video of Dr. Richard Hertel a few years back, wherein I think there was a dog which had Leber's congenital amaurosis RP65 gene deficiency, was injected with RP65 gene containing vector, and there was a significant improvement, which was followed by a study from Moorfields Hospital, wherein the gene therapy has reduced nystagmus. But still, this is in infancy. I don't think we still refer our patients with LCA to for the gene therapy. So in conclusion, various optical and pharmacological treatments are available to improve the quality of life of patients with nystagmus. It's not just improvement of visual acuity, it's improvement of visual function and the quality of life, and they all need multimodal management. I don't think single treatment is good enough for patients who have nystagmus, and we need to be more aware and should practice evidence-based medicine in management of patients with nystagmus. Thank you very much for your kind attention.